The row of mailboxes stood in a neat line at the entrance of Willow Creek, identical gray cubes perched on black posts, as unremarkable as the trimmed hedges and identical beige houses that framed them. To most residents, they were background scenery, but to Lila Moreno on this particular Thursday evening, they were the epicenter of a mystery. She stood across the street in the fading light, arms crossed, watching like a hawk. For 3 weeks straight, her deliveries had evaporated. Not delayed, not misplaced, vanished. First, it was the air fryer she'd been excited to unbox, a practical purchase to replace the Ainster oven she'd inherited from her mother. Then it was a box of scented candles, birthday gifts for her best friend. Finally, and most painfully, the Lego set she'd ordered for her nephew's 8th birthday never made it to her doorstep. She had proof of delivery emails, time-stamped photos from the courier, even the half-folded delivery notices tucked under her doormat. And yet, every time she opened her mailbox, she found nothing but air. At first, she'd chalked it up to porch pirates, that faceless menace plaguing suburban communities everywhere. Maybe someone was following the trucks, watching for packages left unattended. Maybe it was teenagers with nothing better to do. But Willow Creek had gates, cameras at the entrance, and HY that issued fines if your grass dared to grow half an inch above regulation. This wasn't the kind of place where random thieves prowled. The thief, Lila was convinced, lived among them. The realization made her stomach churn. She prided herself on being rational, measured, someone who made decisions based on facts, not feelings. But her instincts whispered louder with every missing box. Someone she waved to every morning was smiling while pocketing her deliveries, so she came prepared. The shoebox sat in her mailbox, disguised with precision. She'd saved a strip of Amazon branded tape from a previous delivery and wrapped it just crooked enough to look authentic. Inside, she'd stuffed old newspapers, a paperback she hated from college, and an ancient flip phone to give it satisfying heft. If anyone dared to snatch it, they'd get a worthless pile of junk. While she got her evidence, the piece de resistance was the camera. She'd bought it that morning, a palm-sized motion-activated device disguised as a solar-powered garden light. From her kitchen window, she could see it perfectly, nestled behind a geranium pot. Its little red indicator blinked when she tested it, and she'd almost laughed with delight. Finally, she thought, she'd outwit whoever was behind this. She paced around her living room, peeking through the blinds like a detective in a late-night stakeout. The neighborhood was calm, sprinklers arched across lawns, joggers in neon sneakers patted down the sidewalks. A delivery van slowed at the corner. Normal life, wrapped in normal sounds. The distant buzzes, the faint music of someone's backyard barbecue. But every shadow near those mailboxes made her heart skip. Her phone buzzed with the neighborhood group chat. Someone had posted a picture of a lost cat, followed by a heated debate about lawn decorations being out of season. Lila scrolled with mild irritation. No one mentioned stolen packages, though she'd brought it up once before. The thread had been buried under a meme about recycling bins. Maybe, she thought grimly, people didn't want to believe the thief was one of their own. At 9 p.m., after the street lamps flickered on, she set up her laptop on the kitchen table and sensed the feed. The screen filled with the grainy view of the mailboxes, ghostly in the pale glow of the streetlight. She armed herself with a bowl of popcorn, not unlike a viewer settling in for a thriller. And then she waited. 10 minutes passed. 15. Half an hour. The camera caught joggers. A dog walker tugging at a stubborn terrier. Even the neighbor's orange cat slinking by. Nothing suspicious. Lila's focus wavered. She drummed her fingers, shifted in her chair, and wondered if she'd wasted her time. Then it happened. A figure entered the frame. Tall, deliberate, not hurried like the joggers or casual like the dog walker. The person wore a blazer, in the middle of a suburban sidewalk after dark. Lila squinted, leaning closer. Who in the world wore business attire to check the mail? The figure hesitated, glancing left and right. A telltale pause, the kind guilty people make when they think no one is watching. Then the hand extended, quick as a snake. The mailbox door swung open. The shoebox lifted into view, and the figure tucked it under one arm with practiced ease. Lila's jaw dropped. Her popcorn tumbled to the floor. It was unmistakable. The neatly combed gray hair. The stiff, upright posture. The blazer she'd seen at countless community meetings. The package thief was none other than Mr. Harold Crandall, the HO president himself. The same man who wrote passive, aggressive emails about trash cans left out too long. The same man who measured lawn grass with a ruler. The self-appointed guardian of neighborhood morality. And here he was, stealing from her mailbox with the casual entitlement of someone who thought the rules didn't apply. She replayed the footage twice, her outrage growing with each loop. He hadn't stumbled upon the box by mistake. He'd stolen with precision, like someone who had done it before. Her first thought was disbelief. Why would Crandall, of all people, need scented candles or Legos? Her second thought was fury here about keeping a recycling bin out half a day too long while pocketing other people's property. Lila pushed back from the table, adrenaline racing. She wanted to march to his pristine front porch right then, confront him and demand answers. But she forced herself to sit down again, breathing deeply. If there was one thing she knew, it was that timing mattered. Evidence mattered. She looked back at the laptop, at the frozen frame of Harold Crandall clutching her fake package, eyes darting like a raccoon caught in the light. The HO president, the neighborhood's moral compass, was about to become the subject of the juiciest scandal Willow Creek had ever seen. And Lila popcorn scattered around her feet, allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. The sting operation had worked. The next morning, Willow Creek woke to a storm that had nothing to do with the weather. Lila's footage spread through the cul-de-sac before she even finished her coffee. She hadn't posted it herself. Not yet. She'd only shared a clip with her closest neighbor, Marcy, in disbelief. But in neighborhoods like theirs, secrets were like dandelions. All it took was one puff for the seeds to scatter everywhere. By sunrise, the video had been passed along in the group chat, reshared on Facebook, and uploaded to TikTok with captions like, "Oh, Prez caught stealing boxes." By noon, the clip had gathered tens of thousands of views. Someone had already turned Crandall's awkward glance over his shoulder into a meme. Another had slowed the footage down, adding dramatic music, turning his fumbling theft into a crime drama parody. One especially creative teen had layered in Mission Impossible's theme. For once, Willow Creek was united, not in lawn maintenance or seasonal wrath debates, but in gleeful outrage. Everyone had an opinion. Some were furious, demanding legal action. Others were amused, eager to watch the mighty fall. A few suspected he'd been stealing for years, hoarding neighborhood goods like a suburban dragon. By evening, the monthly HOA meeting was packed. The community hall, usually sparsely attended, overflowed with folding chairs borrowed from the church next door. Neighbors crammed the aisles, whispering and holding their phones at the ready. Lila sat near the front, arms folded, popcorn, worthy anticipation bubbling in her chest. This wasn't just a meeting anymore, it was a reckoning. At precisely 6 o'clock, Harold Crandall appeared. He looked less like the iron-fisted president of the Homeowners Association and more like a man walking to the gallows. His blazer was still on, though wrinkled this time, and his usually perfect hair looked damp, as though sweat or frantic showering had undone his usual polish. He avoided eye contact, clutching a stack of notes he'd clearly rewritten too many times. "Good evening," he began, voice tight, the microphone squealing with feedback. The room quieted, though the air still hummed with restrained laughter and whispers. "Before we begin our normal agenda, I'd believe I owe you all an acknowledgement," someone cuffed theatrically. Another muttered, "Yeah, you think," and was shushed by their spouse. Crandall's jaw worked like he was chewing invisible gum. "It has come to my attention that a certain video, taken out of context I might add, has caused distress in our community." Lila snorted loudly enough for the first 2 rows to hear. The woman beside her whispered, "Out of context." He had his hand in her mailbox. Crandall cleared his throat again, paper trembling slightly in his hands. "The truth, I'd exercise very poor judgment, and while I could offer explanations, like kleptomania." Someone shouted from the back. Laughter rippled through the hall. Crandall flushed red. "I will instead focus on amends," he said stiffly, ignoring the heckle. "Because what matters most is restoring trust within our community. And to demonstrate my sincerity, I've prepared something." At his signal, 2 board members wheeled out a folding table from the side room. On top sat a cake. It was large, lopsided, and frosted unevenly in pastel pink. Across the top, spelled in wobbly capital letters, were the words, SORIORSTUF. Gasps and chuckles filled the room. Several phones shot. Lila's own lips twitched despite her anger. The cake was ridiculous, absurd even, the letters sagging in places like a child's school project. Crandall gestured at it with all the dignity he could muster. "I baked this myself." Banana crowd erupted. Some clapped mockingly, others booed, and a few shouted for a slice. Someone near the back yelled, "Needs more sprinkles of remorse." The cameras caught it all, immortalizing every crumb of his humiliation. Still, Crandall trudged on. "I am deeply regretful for my actions. I realize now I have betrayed the trust you placed in me as president. I will step down from this position, effective immediately." That, at least, silenced the room for a beat. Then came applause, genuine this time, mixed with cheers of relief. The man who had once fined them for mismatched Christmas lights was finally toppling. Leah leaned back in her chair, savoring the moment. She hadn't expected him to resign, but she relished the justice. It was more than she'd dared hope for when she planted the shoebox. The cake, though, was the piece de resistance. After the meeting adjourned, neighbors crowded the table, laughing as they took slices on flimsy paper plates. Someone live-streamed a taste test, describing the frosting as apology-flavored. Kids posed beside the cake, grinning with thumbs up. Within the hour, a new hashtag trended online, "cake of shame." Crandall lingered awkwardly by the exit. watching his dignity melt away under fluorescent lights. People approached not with sympathy but with pointed comments. Marcy told him her missing gardening tools suddenly made sense. Another resident asked if he'd been planning to steal her lawn gnomes next. He muttered half responses, wilted under the barrage, and finally slipped out the side door. Lila accepted her slice of cake from one of the board members. It was uneven, the frosting thick in some spots, thin in others, but it was strangely delicious. Sweet, nutty, imperfect. She took a slow bite, savoring both the flavor and the symbolic victory. Justice, she decided, didn't always arrive in courtrooms or police reports. Sometimes it came in the form of a wobbly homemade cake with frosting that apologized more lonely than words ever could. By the time she got home, the neighborhood was still buzzing. Her phone pinged nonstop, tags, comments, memes multiplying faster than she could read. One had already photoshopped Crandall's face onto a baker's hat, holding his cake like a trophy. Another looped his guilty glance in slow motion under the caption. Ha! More like H.O.A. caught ya. Lila sat on her couch, exhausted but exhilarated. She knew the story would eventually fade, replaced by the next neighborhood drama. Maybe raccoons in the trash bins, maybe someone painting their shutters the wrong shade of beige. But for now, she was content. Her packages might have vanished, but something better had arrived, a reminder that even in the most manicured suburbs, justice had a way of breaking through. And sometimes, if you set the trap just right, the thief who thought he was untouchable ended up baking you cake.